Good morning, Warriors! Back with another episode of Vigor Warriors 2 and the 1% Club. Hope you guys are doing well today. Hope you guys are on your purpose. Hope you guys are continuing, kind of moving along, getting things done, working hard, working in battle, continuing battling on. Get your muscles stronger and your mental muscles stronger each time as we do this. So every day is another day. Every day is a new day and a wise day. A new day to a wise warrior. And that's kind of how we're looking at it. So thank you once again for all the subscriptions, comments, likes. I didn't get a chance to kind of pull a few of them down. I have so many of these we're going to focus on. I appreciate all the great comments, all the likes, and our subscriptions are going up too. I think we're around 725, something like that. So thank you so much. I feel very blessed about that. And moving along on NoFap, I think we're at we're about 100 over monk mode, but I think we're about 875. We're getting close to 900, so I'll probably do on a 900 once we get to 900. But we're getting there, little by little, moving towards our third year here, trying to keep it going. All right, so let's talk about a great one of our great viewers, Eduardo, who made a nice comment about serving someone. And I think this is also applying, obviously, in life. So you have to serve someone. So I always tell my kids and everybody else around me that you have to either serve the Lord, your God, or you serve yourself. So you have to serve somebody. You basically are not somebody that is, if you think you're a God, you're going to serve other people. You may think you're a God. I mean, so a lot of people have a God complex. But you basically are serving either you or the God. And I think that I've learned the hard way over the years that you have to serve God. And I think when it comes to semen retention, you're either going to be in empire is going to be in heaven, he says, or the empire is in hell. And I think that's a great analogy. So I wanted to kind of talk about that one a little bit as we go along. So, all right, so when we talk about empires and we talk about heaven or hell, and we're talking about trying to kind of look at this journey and battle you're in. Every day, you're kind of walking through the paths of temptation, and they're all around you, right, in our society. Now, in other societies, if you look at the Middle East, you still have a lot of women who are covered, and I think there's a reason for that, given all the temptation we've had over the years, in history. And so, you don't have as much of that temptation out there. And in the old days, we didn't have it. Before internet, before the ability to go ahead and put any kind of images and pictures up there of anybody, you didn't have any sort of, you didn't have these type of direct things. Now, of course, you could still find things around you if you wanted to, back in the 1940s and 50s, I suppose. You could probably find it. I've heard stories from my grandfather and other people like that over the years that, they found ways to find, pictures. But the thing was, a lot of things were more modest nowadays. And it was kind of interesting. I was at, at the high school the other day, and I saw, senior pictures. And it's just amazing how these girls and boys dress nowadays. It's almost like you're looking at, they're showing more of their flesh than anything else. And so it's an interesting type of thing to see all the different types of things that go on with younger people. And it does give me some pause for concern, because when you're looking at this, the temptation is obviously growing and growing. Because as people go ahead and they kind of show that temptation, they may not realize they're doing it. They're trying to get attention, and I'm sure they're just kind of acting out. But in the long run, what ends up happening is when people are in that mindset, it becomes really literally an empire of hell. Because what you're doing is you're basically creating a situation in which all you're doing is looking for pleasure, a short-term pleasure here and there, and you become trapped in your own kind of hell in many ways. Because what you're doing is basically saying that I have to have this sort of pleasure, and I'm not satisfied with this pleasure. That pleasure happened, a few days ago, and now I need more pleasure and more pleasure. And so what's happening is that people kind of go ahead and they continue trying to strive for bigger and bigger excitements and bigger sensations. And what they end up doing is they end up destroying themselves. It's almost like drinking yourself into oblivion. And the same thing comes with semen retention. It's almost like the addiction is killing you because it just continues to grow and grow, and you're not happy with the one aspect any longer. Now you have to have more and more and more, and it becomes even harder and more dangerous to actually go ahead and continue doing. And so this is why I think Eduardo makes a very good point. It becomes like a little hell. You're basically in there, and I've experienced parts of that myself at times over the years. You're really kind of caught saying to yourself, man, this is getting worse and worse. And all of a sudden now you have to kind of step back and say no more of this. But that's harder. The more you're into it, the more you're down into hell, the harder it is to get back into heaven. You have to kind of make a completely lifestyle change. You have to make a lifestyle change saying, I am not going to do this stuff anymore. And it may not happen overnight. I mean, with me, it took a little time to get to the point where I was actually ready for all this. But you have to continue doing that. Because if you fall back into the old pattern, you know what's going to happen. It's going to be the same thing and probably even worse, because next time you're going to have more stimulation. You're desensitized to some level. It's almost the same thing like if you see violent shows. And this is why people talk about the fact that they can create violence and not really look at people as people, because sometimes they see them as a video game, or they see them as some kind of movie or something like that. And so they become desensitized to the violence. In this case, desensitized to the intercourse of sex and pornography and all this kind of stuff. They become desensitized. And so to them, the person they're watching, the people they're watching are not really people. They have no feelings. This is just people on TV that are just used for one thing. And this is the kind of stuff that this gets people really, in one sense, it's fantasy for them because they get away from their own thing. But on the other hand, they can't actually do it. If they have a live person, all of a sudden they can't do it. Because the thing is that this is a fantasy type of thing. You know, the people they're with are really talking. They're individuals. And so this creates a kind of an empire of hell for them. For a person to get caught up in this type of stuff is really kind of focusing on the depths of human nature. Because you're basically looking at a person as an object. And some people actually get to the point where they buy objects for this kind of stuff. I've seen that happen too over the years. And it gets to the point where you're actually kind of putting yourself in a terrible, terrible position. Because now you're inside this cage that you put yourself in. And now you need more stimulation and more stimulation and more stimulation to be able to get out of that. And it's very hard. The longer you go into it, the harder it is. Because you see the short-term benefits, and you're not seeing the benefits of completely going into an empire of heaven. Which means your empire of heaven is going in kind of the other direction. You're basically saying that I'm getting more happiness and satisfaction out of not doing this, and holding my seed and holding my nutrients, and I'm going to see that. Now, it may not be the same type of pleasure, like the short-term pleasure you have, but it's a long-lasting joy and pleasure that you have of not having the type of fear, of living a life that you're strong, and that you're also liking the fact of how people treat you. And you're controlling yourself a lot more than you were. And that's happened to me. My being upset, my anger, and once in a while I still have, times that I do that, but it's very rare now compared to the way it was all the time. I was always on edge. I was always in different types of situations where I could get angry. And now it happens very rarely. If I'm caught off guard, maybe, and I have to continue watching the temptation and all that kind of stuff as well. As I said, there's emotional drains, and then there's the physical drains. And those are all things that make you weaker as a man. And you have to be careful of all of those around you. So you get people who are drainers. They could be suckers, energy suckers, and vampire suckers. And they could actually be the drainers physically and drain your seed as well. So they could do both of those type of things to be able to make you weaker as a man. And I believe that this is I saw a guy named Cooper one time do a video on this many years ago, talking about trying to depopulate the people and trying to demasculate men. And I think he's very right about all this now, after all these years. I think there in society there was a plan. I'm not sure, who has got the plan or anything like that, but I know that it's just too ironic that you're seeing all this stuff happening when people are basically trying to make men weak. And if you have men weak, you don't probably end up having a lot of growth in population, and you also have a problem when it comes to defending countries and defending towns and defending families, because the men are just not strong. And no matter how much a woman weight lifts or tries to do things, she's never going to be as strong, no matter what the movies are telling you, the Marvel books tell you, all this kind of stuff. And women are just not going to be that way. That's not the biology and the purpose women have. And so, they can talk all they want about all this kind of stuff, but the bottom line really is there's no comparison. There's no comparison. Now, if men become weak and they're beta males, then, well, maybe that's a whole different story. Maybe that's different. But a true male, there is nothing like a true male. And that's why a true male is needed, and why there's a lot more people who really want males now. The males are changing. A lot of males are saying no to things, and no, the MGTOW movement's a good example of that. And so females are reacting. Why is this happening? And all of a sudden now they're looking at things a little bit differently too. And I think the brainwashing was that they felt that women having careers, having jobs and everything, this would gain a lot of males. Well, males don't care about the jobs. They care about women having a certain function and providing certain things that males can't provide. And if they don't have that, if all of a sudden they're trying to take over a lot of the male roles of protection and all these other kind of stuff, males just will not simply care about that. I mean, they'll find females eventually that are going to want to do that. So they stay away from that. So as you're going through, remember that, even though they talk about the women as being part of the table and the table here, the males are the ones that have the energy. So just don't forget that. Don't give up your energy freely because you're brainwashed that, well, you're going to lose this woman, or you're going to lose this and lose that. That goes into this empire of hell. And I know I was part of the empire of hell for a while. I was in that experience, right? Looking at pictures, having bad relationships, thinking that, I was not as superior as someone else and not as good as someone else. And the whole thing is that's all a bunch of malarkey. I mean, males are needed because of their energy. The longer you keep your energy, the more in desire you are. Now, you still have to make the choice of what you're going to do with that, but that's a whole nother matter that we've talked about before. But this empire of hell and the empire of heaven is a very great perceptive comment from Eduardo, because you're either going to be living in a life of heaven, I think living with retention, or you're going to live in a life of hell. And this is something that you deal with all the time. Because if you're tempted, now all of a sudden you're more willing to kind of break your rules or go back into a bad pattern, and whether the addiction is drugs or alcohol or sex, whatever it might be, you're going to go back into it because it makes you feel good even for a short period of time. But again, you're going to become desensitized. And as you become desensitized, it becomes not as important. And you can be desensitized, but you can be desensitized about the other way. It's not focusing on the importance of it, but focusing on the fact that you are retaining and that you're basically being more desensitized with all these temptations around you. That's what you want to be desensitized about. You want to go ahead and be desensitized about all the temptations and not be affected by those. Not by the pleasures, but by the temptations. You want to get away from the temptations. You want to be able to say, I'm not going to be affected by this, and I'm going to go ahead and achieve my goals and move on. Because that's the key to the whole thing. The key is to try to make you realize that's not that important. And I think a lot of times, especially young men, are brought up with the other opposite attitude. That, the prince has to always take care of the princess, and it's always a prince, not a beast. And I think that's something that I've come over the years to realize is totally false. And it may sound like a good fairy tale in many ways, but the idea is that the analogy that's more accurate to me is not the prince and the princess, but the beauty and the beast. Because I think a lot of the females that I have talked to over the years, really, their basic idea is to kind of go ahead and get the man that doesn't want them, that kind of acts independently. This is why you have the bad boy syndrome. And yeah, they may eventually marry somebody, but that's not the person they really want. And it's unfortunate. But that's kind of, they're looking more for their security, and it's understandable, that part of it. You know, trying to get security, trying to find someone to have children with, that understandable. But really, what they're really looking for, right, is the person who they can't get. And I've seen this 1,000 times over the years. And that person they can't get, usually it's because they're that kind of rambling, reckless type of person who is the beast, in the beast mode. And that's the person that becomes a lot more popular. So you got to have a little beast within you. You can't be this beta male who's always willing to kind of subjugate themselves to other people. That's not going to work. You know, nothing wrong with being kind and giving to people. That's a whole different story. But when it comes to just kind of subjugating yourself, make yourself worthless to other people, and that's how they look at you when you're always trying to please them and you're doing it because you're trying to please them, that's a whole different matter. And I think that's something that you have to kind of think about as you do this. So you can certainly create a heaven, you know, on earth, or a hell on earth, and your empire, your retention empire, can either be one or both. And I think it all depends on what you decide to do. If you decide to go ahead and take the retention and be someone who is going to be strong and be that masculine person, well, then your long-term benefits, like I've experienced over 875 days or so, is phenomenal. On the other hand, if you're going to continue going into the pattern of behavior that you've had, you're going to continue having the same results that I used to have, right? And you're going to have that empire of hell, and you don't understand why that's happening. See, I didn't know why that was happening. That's my biggest issue. I didn't realize that there's a lot of things around this that we don't realize. It's because I was brainwashed for a lot of years. You know, brainwashed about what society teaches you and what they're trying to kind of tell you. You know, you assume everything is correct and all these things are correct, but, you know, I'm finding out that we've been living in a blue matrix for a long, long time. And fortunately, God has kind of given me the different mechanisms to figure that out over time. But, you know, it took a lot of years. And that's kind of one reason I'm doing this, just to kind of get the information out there so you guys can kind of take with it what you want, but realizing that everything that you're seeing on television and in the movies and all these other things are not necessarily real. Those are things that are run by certain people who want to make a certain agenda, and they want certain things to happen. And part of what I think they want to happen is to demasculize males, and that will, as long as I'm around, that's not happening with me. And I know that a lot of you guys feel the same way in there as well. All right, guys. Well, I got a bumpy ride here. We're always going to bumpy rides. We're going to make it through. Make it through, my friends. All right, so enough for today. Hope you guys have a great day. Continue to battle on. Continue to meet all these challenges you go one day at a time. Remember, every day is a new day to a wise warrior. God bless you guys. And remember, guys, always to battle on each day. Battle on!